The man in the beige overcoat had been sitting on the park bench for 3 hours before anyone noticed he wasn't blinking. At first, no one paid him any attention. The park was always full of people joggers tracing familiar paths. Children chasing each other across the grass, elderly couples feeding birds with quiet patience. A man sitting still on a bench didn't stand out. In fact, in a place built for stillness, he blended in perfectly. His coat, a dull beige that seemed to absorb the color of everything around it, made him even easier to ignore. But 3 hours is a long time for anyone to remain completely motionless. It was a little girl who noticed first. She had been playing near the fountain, chasing pigeons that flapped away just out of reach. Every now and then, she glanced at the bench where the man sat. Something about him unsettled her, though she couldn't say why. Children often sense what adults overlook, and in her small, unspoken way, she felt that something wasn't right. "Mama," she said, tugging at her mother's sleeve. "That man is staring at me." Her mother barely looked up from her phone. "Don't point, sweetie. That's rude, but he hasn't moved," the girl insisted. "Not even once." Her mother sighed and finally glanced toward the bench. The man sat exactly as described, upright, hands resting on his knees, eyes fixed forward. For a moment, the woman felt a flicker of discomfort, but then she shrugged it off. "He's probably just resting," she said. "Come on, let's go." They left, and the man in the beige overcoat remained. As the afternoon stretched into evening, the light began to change. Shadows grew longer, stretching across the park like reaching fingers. The crowds thinned. Joggers slowed to a stop. Families packed their things and headed home. Still, the man did not move. A group of teenagers passed by, laughing loudly, their voices echoing in the cooling air. One of them, a boy with restless energy, noticed the figure on the bench. "You'll check that guy out," he said, nudging his friend. "He looks like a statue." They approached cautiously, curiosity overriding their better judgment. "Hey man," one of them called out. "You good?" No response. The boy waved a hand in front of the man's face. "Nothing." "That's creepy," another whispered. "Maybe he's asleep," someone suggested, though even they didn't sound convinced. "Yeah, with his eyes open," the first boy replied. They laughed nervously. The kind of laughter that comes when something feels wrong, but no one wants to admit it. After a moment, they backed away and continued down the path, their voices fading quickly. The men remained. By the time the park lights flickered on, casting a pale glow over the empty pathways, the air had grown noticeably colder. The wind picked up, rustling leaves in a way that sounded almost like whispers. "Hey!" Security guard made his rounds. He's jingling softly at his side. He walked the same route every evening, checking gates and ensuring that no one lingered after closing time. That's when he saw him. The guard slowed his steps as he approached the bench. Something about the stillness felt unnatural, like a photograph placed in the middle of a living world. "Sir," he called out. No response. He stepped closer. The man's eyes were open, wide, unfocused. "Sir?" "The park is closing," the guard said more firmly. Still nothing. A chill crept up his spine. He reached out, hesitating for just a second before placing a hand on the man's shoulder. The fabric of the beige overcoat was cold. Too cold. The guard flinched and pulled his hand back. "Okay, that's not right," he muttered. He took out his radio, his voice slightly shaky as he called for assistance. Minutes later, two more guards arrived. They circled the bench, exchanging uneasy glances. "Is he?" one of them began. "Only one way to find out," the first guard replied, with a deep breath. He reached out again, this time placing two fingers against the man's neck. There was no pulse. "Call it in," he said quietly. But as he spoke, something changed. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible. The man blinked. All three guards froze. Did you see that? One whispered. Yeah, another replied. His voice barely audible. Slowly and naturally, the man's head tilted upward. His eyes, which had been staring blankly ahead, now seemed to focus, but not on the guards, on something behind them. The guards turned instinctively, but there was nothing there. Just empty park pathways and flickering lights. When they turned back, the man was standing. None of them had seen him move. One moment he had been sitting. The next, he was upright, towering over them in his beige overcoat. Sir, the first guard began, his voice trembling. The man's lips parted. For a second, it seemed like he might speak. Instead, a sound emerged that didn't belong to any human throat. It was low, hollow, like wind passing through an empty tunnel. The guards stepped back in unison. What the hell is that? One of them whispered. The man took a step forward, then another. His movements were stiff, mechanical, as though he were learning how to walk for the first time. Stay back, the guard shouted. Though his voice lacked authority, the man stopped, and then slowly he smiled. It was wrong, too wide, too still, like it had been drawn onto his face rather than formed naturally. What are you? The guard asked. The man tilted his head, as if considering the question. Then, in a voice that sounded like multiple voices layered together, he spoke, watching. The word echoed strangely, as though it didn't belong to the space around them. Watching what? One of the guards demanded. The man's eyes shifted, scanning the empty park, everything. A sudden gust of wind swept through, causing the trees to sway violently. The lights flickered again, plunging parts of the park into darkness. When the lights stabilized, the man was gone. The guards stood there, stunned, their breaths visible in the cold air. Where did he go? The first guard interrupted. Just don't. They searched the area, but there was no sign of him. No footprints, no sound, nothing. It was as if he had never been there at all. The incident was reported, of course. Authorities arrived, took statements, and searched the park thoroughly, but without evidence. The story quickly lost its weight, a misunderstanding. Some said mass hysteria, others suggested the guards, however, knew what they had seen. Days passed, then weeks. Life returned to normal, until people started noticing something strange. Cameras began malfunctioning. Footage would glitch at specific times, showing brief flashes of a figure in a beige overcoat standing just at the edge of the frame, always still, always watching. In one clip, he appeared behind a woman waiting at a bus stop. She didn't notice him. No one did. In another, he stood in the corner of a grocery store, his eyes fixed on a child picking out candy. Again and again, the same pattern emerged. He was always there, just out of sight, just long enough to be. A sensation, an overwhelming feeling of being observed, of being studied. And then came the reports. People began to describe moments where they felt off, like they had lost time, like they had been somewhere else. Even if only for a second, a man claimed he had been walking down the street when everything went silent, completely silent. When the sound returned, he found himself standing in a different place, with no memory of how he got there. A woman said she saw a man in a beige overcoat standing in her living room. When she blinked, he was gone. The stories spread quickly, dismissed by some, feared by others, but one detail remained consistent. Everyone who claimed to have seen him described the same thing. He didn't blink, and if you looked into his eyes for too long, you felt like something inside you was being taken. But something deeper, something you couldn't quite name. Months later, the park bench remained, but every now and then, someone would pause as they walked past it. A strange feeling settling over them, a sense of being watched.